Okay, when I
Okay, all right.
that vision, I were trying. We were going,
Yeah.
where's the?
Yeah.
And we go,
All right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm practicing with the gavel. I haven't ever used it before, so there it is.
Don't break the head off.
I was told it wasn't big enough, but I think it's maple. It's just the right size. It's for us, just the right size. Thank you. So the hour is 4:02, and I'd like to call the committee of the whole to order. It is March 26, 2024. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Allen,
Allen present by remote if allowed. Good afternoon.
Bates here.
Berman,
Burma's here.
Ready,
Doherty's here.
Davis. Mr. Davis, are we on? Yep. Okay, Ford. Gums. Iqbal, Juby. Juby here. Kenyon. Caius. Leonard. Lewis. Linder.
Linder on remote.
Molina.
On remote.
Who's else is on? Le- Leonard?
Molina.
Remote.
Yep, gotcha. Okay.
Molina present.
Roth.
Roth here.
Sanchez.
Sanchez present.
Silva. Silva is here. Strathman.
Strathman here.
Sturgis.
Sturgis present remote.
Carver. Tepe.
Tepe here.
Williams.
Williams present remote.
Young.
Young present remote.
And Pirog.
I'm here.
Quorum is out present.
We do not
Yes or
have,
no? No?
No quorum is out.
we do not have a quorum.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Caius is-
9, 10, 11. We're still short.
We're like.
Three more
rich players waiting for.
or two more.
We are short,
Still short.
still short. So, all right, if someone shows up in the meanwhile, if not, then, but there are no decisions that'll be made here at this meeting.
Anyway. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
All right, we have, if I can get your permission to allow Miss Allen,
Can't do that
not allow them in?
Not
because you don't have a quorum.
We don't have a quorum.
We can't, all right.
No,
So,
they can talk.
Mrs. Allen, Mr. Doherty, Mr. Linder, Mr. Leonard, Ms. Molina, Mr. Sturgis, Mr. Williams, Mr. Young, just please just listen.
They're free to participate. Technically, this isn't a meeting yet.
In this non-meeting.
Going to have an informational gathering.
Yes.
And we're grateful to be able to listen. Thank you.
And let's go on. Thank you. And comment, I hope. Mr. Iqbal, could you please do us the honor and give us a pledge?
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We cannot do the approval of minutes, so let's go on to public comment. Tony Lusenko?
Hi, thank you, Madam Chairwoman and the board. My name is Tony Lusenko. I'm the director of the Elgin Development Group. We're the economic development organization. We do specific economic development functions through a partnership with the city of Elgin. We have a contractual relationship. We're actually a division of the Chamber of Commerce. We're doing everything we can on the local level to affect economic development. We are working on workforce development, transportation development, business retention, business attraction. But we're doing everything we can, and we could use your help. And so those two items on the agenda regarding economic development, we feel is very important that the county, one of the only ones in the area that doesn't represent on a regional basis, needs to try and do that. And we support the initiative, and we hope you move forward with both the organization and strategic plans. So we support the initiative and want you, or ask, would like you to move forward. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mario Farfan? Don't know if I pronounced it right.
That's good. Mario Farfan, thank you. All right, so thank you for inviting us here today, Mark Vankerhoff. My name is Mario Farfan. I'm the founder of the Northwest Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, founded in 2015. We cover counties of Cook, DuPage, Lake, and Kane County. The reason we're here tonight is in support of the Economic Development Organization Committee that is being proposed. As representing, our chamber represents the Latino businesses here in Kane County. We feel that it's time for, Kane County to unite and collaborate and just get things done, have the resources available for all business communities, all business owners that will bring forth, better housing, better opportunities, better resources. We work closely with our legislators, and we definitely want to be part of this group and be heavily involved to support the great Kane County. And myself being a veteran, veterans are important for us as well. So we understand that, to get things done, you have to show up and you have to speak up. So again, we're happy to be here tonight. Thank you. And again, thank Mark Vankerhoff and his group. And however we can help, whatever resources you need from us, from our communities, we're here for you as well, here to collaborate. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment. So Mr. Van Kerkhoff.
Good afternoon, Mark Van Kerkhoff, Director, Kane County Development and Community Services Department. Thank you for the great turnout this afternoon. This is so wonderful. We did this just over a year ago in February with a committee of the whole focused on economic development. We've got some exciting progress that we've made to report on today through our consultants, RW Ventures. But before I do that, I want to give a couple thank yous to make sure. Number one, the report was entirely funded by the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity through a grant that we applied for. So I want to thank the state of Illinois for paying for this. I especially want to thank our economic development partners, which includes municipalities, chambers of commerce, other economic development organizations, our community colleges. Many of them, some of them are here. Many of them turned out a year ago for that committee of the whole meeting. A number of them have turned out here in support of this. We invited them, so there may be some listening in online as well, because this has been a topic of interest for them. We also want to thank them because they did support our grant application to make our application successful with the state. I also want to thank John Grueling, who's also with us this afternoon. He's been serving as our economic development advisor since most of last year, especially to help us take most advantage of our regional collaboration with the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership. Who's really been a key player in working with some of the opportunities that have come into us and help get those deals sealed, as well as he's met with a lot of our municipalities also voicing support for this initiative. And then I also want to thank Chris Toth on our planning team. He's been the point person on all the grant administration and a lot of the things to make things really happen. And then finally, I want to thank RW Ventures, who you'll hear from. Dirk, you put my presentation up? I just have a few introductory things just to cover before we go. The first item is actually a fun one, but it ties into our topic today. Some of you may have been following in Kane County Connects that we had 19 of our companies get entered in what's called Maker Madness, put on by the Illinois Manufacturing Association. We were excited last week to announce that 4 made the Sweet 16, much like the NCAA tournament. And just this afternoon, they announced that 3 of those companies made it to the Elite 8. So that's 3 companies making products in Kane County out of the entire state that have made this final bid. So I put this up. We want to celebrate those products, all the manufacturers and products. But we have an opportunity to vote for these 3 to bring them into the final 4, and hopefully one of them is the grand champion.
Mark, before you go forward, could you just tell us very quickly what Boulay Pro and Active Wall? Oh, I think we're all familiar with Gindo's hot sauce.
Great. Well, one thing nice about Gindo's hot sauce is they actually source a lot of their products from local growers. So a lot of the products that go into the sauce are from our local farmers are growing for Kane. Active Wall raw storage products, that is a unique system designed for the classroom to make classroom space storage more interesting, interactive, and more efficient for teachers. That's a nice product, but they've also done other innovative products for libraries, including the archives at the Vatican and right here in Kane County. The Broly Pro 200 AX, that machine does so many things, you have to look online. It is really complex, and another, amazing that it's designed and made here in Kane County.
Is it a manufacturing product or is it a domestic product?
It's a piece of manufacturing equipment, is what I understand. So, but go ahead and look online and vote. You can vote every day, but all this week. So with that, just a real brief history of where we've been. Back in May of 22 was when our team, Chris Toth and I, submitted the application for the maximum amount that was allowed to be applied for. We had a lot of support, as I mentioned. In September of 2022, we were awarded the grant. Early in 2023, after a competitive process, we retained RW Ventures and their partners for preparing the countywide plan. And now we're here in 2024, something we've been talking about for years, having a plan and using that as a gift to launch an organization. Some of the things that we believe were a basis for being successful and being awarded the grant that the state looked at. One, as Tony mentioned, we're the only large collar county, in fact, one of the only large counties in the Midwest within 100 miles that does not have an economic development organization, as you can see on the map. Another factor was that we identified in the application that 38% of Kane County residents live in a disproportionately impacted economic area, either because of COVID or because of other factors. And those are identified through our CMAP, which is our regional planning agency, and through the state of Illinois through their work with the COVID impacts. And then finally, comprehensive economic development and marketing strategy is needed for us to compete now and in the future for high-paying jobs, maintain a sustainable economy. And in our pre-meeting with our consultants, they were reminding us also just to compete for the abundance of federal funding that is out there for the economy and innovation. A year ago, we talked about the general strategy was to combine our partnership, being part of the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, which we now have a full year under our belt, plus countywide economic development that takes full advantage of that, but works specifically with our 29 municipalities and other partners, but have high impacts and maximum efficiencies. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our consultants, RW Ventures.
Thank you for the introduction, Mark. It's great to be here. We're excited to share this plan with you, and we have time at the end for discussion as well. We're excited to get your input. So I'm Ashley Bakelman. I'll be starting off the presentation and then handing it over to Bob Weisbord for the second half. Let's see. Figure out how to use this clicker. So to kick it off, this is just this is one theoretical slide we have that it kind of underlies our thinking behind the market analysis and all of the work that's been done here. So this first graph talks about how right now we're in a fundamentally different economy. The graph at the top shows that firms are being created and destroyed at faster rates than in the past, and this drives economic growth more sustainably. And the bottom chart shows that historically, larger firms spent about 65 years on the S&P 500, and then by the 1990s, they were spending only about 15 years. So both large and small firms are being created and destroyed faster, which makes our economy more dynamic. And we're in this period of creative disruption that's disrupting industries, labor markets, and places. And this means the drivers of growth are different in this economy. And these 5 drivers of growth, our market analysis has assessed all 5 of them and the intersections between them. So I'll go through them in a little bit more detail later in the presentation, but basically we've looked at intersections of growing industry clusters, the complementary workforce and human capital and labor markets that align with them, the associated innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. And then we've also looked at what we call governance, but it's not just government, it's the civic and governmental institutions that can enable this growth, and also urban form or spatial efficiency. It's where workers are located, where jobs are located, where people live, the connections between the two, the built environment. So the economy rewards places that have all these complementary assets that are concentrating in place. And that means looking forward into the future, it's important for Kane County to be deliberate about what it wants to be. And these graphs show that historically, places that were farther behind economically, that lacked human capital or investment, caught up because human capital moved to those locations, investment flowed to those locations. And now the opposite is true, where places that are already farther ahead continue to get farther ahead. And that makes it even more important that that Kane County take this opportunity to define a vision and say, this is what we want to be, and this is how we're going to be deliberate about getting there. So that largely speaks to the goals of this project. We want to grow Kane County's economy, and we've looked at intersections of these 5 market levers. These are the same ones from the previous slide: clusters, human capital, innovation, governance, and spatial efficiency. So our goal is to define a vision for the county and then look at what assets can we build from to achieve that vision. To do this assessment, it's been a combination of data analysis, interviews, over 50 interviews conducted, and research. And the data set, this is just a snapshot of some of the data sets we have put together. At the end of this presentation, there's an appendix, which after this meeting, you can all look through that, and we welcome any questions or additional insights you have to add to that. And the one thing I wanted to point out here is that we're grateful to some of the regional partners that contributed data to this effort. Intersect Illinois provided some data, as did CMAP, and then the newly formed Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership was very helpful as well. So the team, in addition to RW Ventures, we worked with Mass Economics, who provided a lot more high quality data across each of the market levers, and a team of independent contractors with expertise across each of the market levers. So this will be a quick overview of some of the key findings of the market analysis. So historically, Kane County has grown by 3 different pressures over time. It's grown as a farming community, an economy, an industrial economy, and a bedroom community. But as I mentioned on that first slide, it's increasingly important to be deliberate about what Kane County wants to be in the future. Growth is no longer going to take care of itself. So Kane County has an opportunity to respond to these next economy trends, define a vision for what it wants to be, and that also presents an opportunity to reconcile some of the tensions that have come up in these 3 different growth trajectories as a farming community, industrial economy, and bedroom community. So I'll go through the 5 market levers now, just a few takeaways from the market analysis. For industry clusters, there's a lot of legacy manufacturing, transportation, distribution, and logistics, and agriculture strengths. In particular, I wanted to point out that manufacturing generates some of the highest revenue for the county. And looking at employment, there's a high concentration of metals manufacturing and food and beverage manufacturing. In addition to a large business services sector, and this is all types of businesses that serve other businesses, ranges from, it could be back office payroll services to landscaping. And this drives growth in other sectors and also creates a decent amount of entrepreneurship opportunities for residents of the county. And across all of these legacy industry strengths, there's a need to address some of the new challenges and opportunities, partially due to COVID, such as reshoring, digitization, and climate change. Looking at human capital, in general, Kane County's workforce is less educated than the metropolitan area. When you look at the residents that have a bachelor's degree or higher, and there's significant racial disparities in this educational attainment. The graph to the right shows Hispanic or Latino origin residents have the lowest levels of bachelor's plus. The community colleges do provide a decent amount of training to meet some of the near-term skills gaps. Like we did a lot of interviews, constantly heard like welding, for instance, and they are preparing people to fill those gaps. But looking into the future, there's a need for even more credentialing programs to prepare the workforce for future jobs in high growth sectors. And there's some baseline industry involvement in putting these curricula together, but there's opportunity for more. In innovation and entrepreneurship in general, there's a lack of strong private sector-led innovation and no strong research, aside from Fermilab, there's not a strong research institution. But looking at entrepreneurship, there is an entrepreneurial mindset in the county. There's, compared to the region, there's a higher number of, there's a high entrepreneurship rate, and in particular, a high number of minority business enterprises. And many of these are Hispanic-owned small businesses and are in need of support tailored to these businesses. Looking at spatial efficiency, the stats on here are things you probably already know from living here, but the county has great access to distribution networks. And when we conducted interviews with business owners, this was cited as a main reason that they were located in Kane County. They didn't emphasize as much, like if we were talking to a manufacturer, they didn't emphasize as much that they located here because they were in proximity to other manufacturers. Instead, we heard distribution networks, in addition to land availability. But as you know, that comes with, due to a lot of the unincorporated land, it's hard to undertake new development because of the infrastructure investments needed to do that. People did cite commuting challenges to reach jobs. Most people drive to work and there's a lot of traffic challenges, but those that take public transportation have last mile transportation gaps. And in general, as the economic vision for the county is defined, there's a need for more innovative land use and zoning policies to align with how do we achieve that vision. In governance, Illinois as a state and the Chicago metropolitan region in general have a high level of fragmentation. There's a lot of different levels of government, as you all know. And in Kane County, each municipality does its own economic development. And so there is fragmentation in that respect, which speaks to the need for a bit more county-led coordination. And there's a lack of private sector involvement as well in developing these economic growth initiatives, which means there's opportunity both to better engage the county in economic development and the private sector. So that's the overview of the 5 market levers. Some key takeaways from that is for industry growth, there's opportunity to strengthen supply chains within metals and machinery. There's opportunity to strengthen connections between agriculture and a lot of the food and beverage manufacturing and packaging firms in the region. There's opportunity to provide support for startups in business services, particularly those that are BIPOC owned. BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. And there's opportunity to train a workforce to fill many of the in-demand skills in emerging and growing industries, not just in Kane County, but across the region. In addition, there's a lot of corn and soybean farms in the county, but there's opportunity to explore some higher growth opportunities, for instance, fruits and vegetables, and maintain the county's growth as a bedroom community, a great place to live, which is why a lot of people locate here. And some of the cross-cutting points I wanted to make, I already mentioned the need for increased private sector involvement in developing these programs for growth, and alongside growth plans shifting to more coordinated, progressive, and strategic zoning. As the strategies are developed to realize the county's vision for the future, this is an inclusive growth plan, and inclusion in general leads to more sustainable growth. So key pathways to think about as these strategies are designed are ownership. How can we grow BIPOC company and real estate ownership? How can we increase BIPOC employment, particularly in good jobs? Location and access, thinking about siting job centers in disadvantaged areas that typically haven't had access. And finally, participation, ensuring that the economic development strategies that are designed and launched are created with diverse representation. So looking ahead, King County is uniquely positioned in that it's at the urban rural fringe of the Chicago metropolitan area. And there are many counties across the country at a similar fringe that I don't think we haven't found a lot of literature for how these counties are managing growth well and all the tensions that come with being at that fringe. So Kane County has an opportunity to be a leader in figuring that out. And as I mentioned, that this is the moment to be deliberate about what the county wants to be. It's at a moment of economic transition, and there's opportunity to build off a lot of legacy strengths, metals, food manufacturing, and business services. And in addition, its agricultural strengths. But to do this, it needs a strong economic vision and also the institutional capacity to not just implement strategies now, but continuously assess new opportunities that emerge as the economy changes, and develop and coordinate launch of these programs. And with that, for this section, I will hand it off to Bob Weisbord.
This one's. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I also want to really thank Mark and Chris and John Gruling. This has generally been a team effort and continues to be. We're really pleased to be here and to be doing this work. Before I jump in, I want to, I think you've heard that at the moment, you've had a pattern of development across the county driven by very different drivers: residential demand in bedroom communities, industrial development around infrastructure corridors, and historical agriculture. It's resulted in patterns of development that create tensions at various places and economic leverage points. And I think at a very high level, you're doing the exact right thing at exact right time in taking this on, because it's kind of so far so good, but it's going to get messy from here if you aren't more deliberate. And it may be getting messy already. I mean, I don't know what your local tensions are moment to moment, but we've been excited to find, and this is not always the case because I've done work like this all around the country, that I think the county is extraordinarily well positioned to take advantage of where the economy is going. And our storyline is that the economy is dramatically changing. People argue about whether we're 30% into the knowledge economy or the fourth industrial revolution, or 60% in. But we're only partway in, whatever it is. If you think of Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and digitalization across all industries, the economy is dramatically changing. And particularly now with the huge flow of federal funds and the reshoring, there's great opportunity for exactly the assets you have. You have the metals and manufacturing base, you have the workforce base, you have kind of healthy communities, you have lots of land potentially for development along whatever lines you decide. So it's the right time to decide kind of who you want to be and what businesses and people you want to serve and how you want to grow. And I think there's a lot of trajectories to do that. So the first step will be finding some way to begin to come up with a more unified vision for where you want to go and how you want to get there. And this doesn't happen all at once. We took a loose shot. This needs a lot of wordsmithing, throwing a vision out there just to identify some of the components. You're managing an urban rural fringe set of tensions. You want to build off your existing assets, particularly in manufacturing, agriculture, and business services. And you ultimately want to create a nice balance aligning your quality of life, your open land, your amenities, your bedroom communities, your healthy communities where people like to live with a rich quality of life with industrial and economic growth that provides jobs and wealth for workers and owners. So we've identified, and none of these will come as a surprise given the market analysis that Ashley described. And let me say, by the way, the appendix, which you'll see later, in the interest of brevity, we pulled out a lot of facts. The appendix has 20 slides of detailed facts that support these conclusions, and the report will have 100 pages of that. So we're happy to answer questions, but there's a lot more information behind this stuff. I wanted to throw out a couple possibilities for strategies. These are at a strategic level. The report will identify models and examples of how one implements these, but each of them would require business planning and capitalization and work to implement. First of all, you have a very strong manufacturing base. Manufacturing has transitioned around the country. The places that are not doing anything, especially because you have a lot of small manufacturing that's kind of tier 3, 4, 5 suppliers, are going to start losing market share and failing. And the places that are working with their manufacturers are going to really grow. And this is a place you're particularly well positioned. Manufacturers need new products. They need access to new markets, huge market growth in clean tech and health tech. There's a whole new markets that depend underneath them on metals and machinery manufacturing, but they need to transition into the new markets. They need help they need new process. Manufacturing is really digitalizing. It's becoming much more efficient. They need new workforce. So you have a lot of opportunities in manufacturing support. Couple models. MHub in Chicago has become a national model for manufacturing hard tech innovation and support. Very interested in working out here and with your manufacturers, and has a lot of resources. A couple of places have created what we call metals hubs, networks of manufacturers to do joint bidding and collaboration.
Just hold on. Could we close the door? There's a lot of people are coming and going. So we can make sure we can pay attention to you without hearing the rumble of goodbyes outside. Thank you.
So the general point is, and there will be more detail in the report, there are a lot of different models for building on the manufacturing base you have, and now it's the right time to do it. With respect to agriculture, at the moment you have 50% agricultural land, as Ashley said. It is mostly producing crops for animal feed. There's exceptions, of course. It is protected in effect because agricultural development of that land is constrained by the willingness of the county or municipalities, depending on where the land is incorporated or unincorporated areas, to zone for anything different and to put an infrastructure for other development for housing or industry. And one way to preserve the agriculture, if you didn't have those constraints, I think right now the market would be buying up a lot of your agricultural land. And one way to preserve the agriculture is to help the farmers transition to higher value-added products, right? That will make the land more valuable in effect. Your agriculture is not, it's doing fine, but it's not doing exceptionally. And you have a very strong base in food manufacturing, food and beverage manufacturing that is not tied to your agricultural base. We did a big project in Sacramento, which is surrounded by big growth areas and has a lot of food and beverage manufacturing, but their farmers are growing food that their manufacturers are processing, right? They grow avocados and then turn them into guacamole, or they're doing farm to table. They're doing higher value added agriculture. We think of opportunities to support your agriculture to grow in higher value ways, which will help preserve the land from market forces. Over time, there's going to be more and more pressure on that land because you have huge opportunities for growth for residential and industrial. To achieve either of these things, you need to keep working on your workforce. One of your key assets is you have a very strong manufacturing workforce already. But as Ashley said, it's going to need to be upgraded, and particularly as manufacturing digitalizes and becomes more sophisticated, it's going to have to be upgraded. You have some institutions that are working on this. They're not, as is true throughout, and I was on the City Colleges Board of Chicago for a long time, as is true throughout the country, they tend to not be sufficiently employer driven. We really be sufficiently employer driven. They have employers come in once. This is not meant to be particularly critical. It's a very challenging thing for community colleges to engage industry the way in this economy it needs to be engaged. And a lot of places are creating industry consortia that are doing their own training or turning back to, like City Colleges now has some really interesting programs that are really basically run by the industry leaders and are much more tailored to the next economy job force. Entrepreneurship is interesting thing. And the numbers, when we first looked at the numbers, you're doing horribly on innovation and entrepreneurship. Now, so it's very hard to get at this with the numbers because you can have a lot of entrepreneurs that don't happen to file for patents or don't apply for federal SBR grants or some of the indicators. We did the interviews. It turns out you have a lot of entrepreneurs, most of them at the moment disproportionately in retail businesses, which are not as high growth businesses, not a bad place to be for personal wealth creation, but you're going to have opportunities in health tech and clean tech and manufacturing and other kinds of high growth businesses to support entrepreneurs. And you have to start migrating toward that and identifying, you have a lot of identifying the people and places that you can support it. That also will relate to both the agricultural and manufacturing changes because there will be new business opportunities and supply chains emerging that entrepreneurs can enter. And lastly, I want to talk about an EDO. You know, what we're giving you is a kind of lay of the land of potential pathways to grow your economy, filling those out, deciding on priorities continuously. You need to be able to continuously do what we're doing. Right, to annually look at where is our economy now? Where's the next opportunity? Right now, by the way, there's a huge amount of federal funding available, and the places that are figuring this out and are identifying, where can we compete for all this defense money, this Institute of Health money, this EDA money. There's a huge amount of federal funding right now that is looking for places to spend, and they're having the challenge that a lot of communities that could use it don't know how to access it. And don't know which of their assets are competitive, but an EDO can help you with that. I also obviously think, as Ashley said, an EDO helps you with being deliberate. And this is a 100-mile radius. Pretty much every other county has an EDO of some kind, with the exception of you. And this says Cook doesn't, because Cook doesn't have a separate one, but Cook County itself has created an economic development department and a private sector advisory board. So they have an EDO function that they've organized. And an EDO will coordinate growth. It will help avoid the situation where you have 30 municipalities who are competing with each other or individually can't do bigger deals because they don't have the staff on or the capacity or the finances. The EDO can aggregate money and resources and do bigger deals that touch multiple municipalities, develop initiatives and programs. One of the things you'll see in the report, which we pulled out of here, is these market levers and approach to economic development demand a different way of doing economic development that starts with your existing assets, that engages your existing firms. The best way to attract firms is to have your firms tell their business buddies around the country this is a great place to do business, and particularly within industries, that you have the right industry supports, that you have the right workforce. So you have to start with growing your existing assets and supporting them. EDO can do that. John's going to be talking to you much more about the EDO, I'm sure, at some point. Excuse me.
What do you want?
Is that a question?
No, I think.
Well, I think someone needs to mute, maybe. So big picture, we think this is a moment of big opportunity and that you have the assets to compete. And it's the right time to focus on and pick which ones you want to invest in and move forward. And the U has to be not just the county. The county brings enormous resources, both capacities and financial resources to the table, but the private sector. The economy ultimately is the outputs of businesses. The private sector needs to be engaged in growing it. And the places succeeding have really private sector driven economic development organizations. We wanted at this point to just open it up for comments or questions. We want to know, there's no ego here. I'm sure we missed things. I'm sure there's things that are controversial that you want to talk about. We're really interested in any kind of feedback. The report's in a first draft, so we can still incorporate lots of changes around what are we missing? What are your priorities? What strategic opportunities do you see? What other considerations inform the EDO or anything else you want to tell us? So please jump in.
All right, so we've got Mr. Sturgis. I see you first, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
So, sir, one of the issues as a business owner in the community for 30 years up at the north end of the county, I am reached out to on a regular basis concerning I would like to say the cost of doing business in the county, but really it's more the return on investment for these people. Whether it's a manufacturer purchasing a building, whether it's a an apartment complex. Everybody is looking, saying, you know, the cost of doing business is just becoming so prohibitive that unless there's some financial incentive, such as a TIF district, a redevelopment district, or something like that, it becomes difficult. And at the county level, I know that we've had several inquiries over the year that Mark Van Kerkhoff and I have spoken of, but we don't do those type of things in the unincorporated sections of the county. And I'm just curious, for the other areas that you do work with, how are some of them handling this? And is everything a larger institutionalized investor that you're working with, or are these, you know, what's the typical person that you're trying to attract in here?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the last part of the question, so I may come back to you on that. We talk a lot about the tax value proposition of a place. You know, it's not just about how high your taxes are, it's about what people are getting for it. And there are a lot of places that calculation gets off. You know, so lots of companies come to Chicago, which is not a low tax city, because we have great institutions, we have great infrastructure, we have great workforce, we have complementary firms. You know, I'm not saying we couldn't work on our tax value proposition as well, but I do think we interviewed a fair number of business owners, and we did hear, and developers, both in commercial and industrial developers and residential, and we did hear the challenges. I think there's a couple things. Governments can reduce the time. You know, time is money in business, right? So governments can reduce the bureaucracy and the cost of permitting and putting in infrastructure and doing all the things they need to do. Certain kinds of larger developments do require some kind of subsidy to get started. They're too risky for the private sector to kick off. So that's why you have TIF districts. You have I used to do a lot of work designing specialized finance venture funds, various kinds of, right now in the Southland, we're developing a whole finance authority to support larger scale developments like innovation parks and things like that. I do think business needs support. I think it needs to be strategic, you know, so I'm not sure if that answers your question. I think I'm saying I'm sympathetic to it, and this partly depends on where the risk is in the market and how to efficiently offset it and get government out of the way when it needs to be out of the way. On what's the typical person? I'm not sure I understood that. You're asking who's the typical client I work for, or who's the typical business I'm going after, or something else?
Yeah, the typical business, if I can, thank you. The typical businesses or industries that we're trying to attract, are those all larger institutionalized, are we trying to get a Coca-Cola bottling plant? Are we trying to get a Caterpillar tractor, or are we looking for the $1 million guy that's coming in and just saying, hey, my dad had a plastic molding company, and we're just trying to stay within the county or move to a county that has some better workforce?
So within the last 10 years, we work with a company that produces NETS data, takes Dun & Bradstreet data basically and polishes it and aggregates it over decades. You can look at patterns. And we did this analysis, and other people have done this too, about where economic growth really comes from in a particular geography or a particular point in time. The most growth comes from your existing firms, the most net growth. The second most comes from startups, comes from entrepreneurship, and the third most comes from attraction. So, and attraction depends on the other two. If your existing firms aren't doing well, you don't have entrepreneurs, very hard to attract businesses. So my view is you engage your existing firms and grow them of all sizes. You support entrepreneurs to commercialize stuff coming out of universities or firms or in the next economy. And that makes you more attractive, but your attraction is focused around kind of who you want, what economy you want to have. So you can decide you want to attract food and beverage manufacturers, or you want to move up the supply chain in metals. And it's not that I'm not against attracting big companies, but I think in most cases, and there's a very good firm out of Washington called Good Jobs First that does this data. I think in most cases, the enormous just financial incentives we pay to big firms to move somewhere are not paying for themselves as well as they would if you invest them in your existing firms or in support for your workforce and other kinds of things, increasing your value, right? So instead of a one-time payment of $100 million to some firm to come here, putting that $100 million into making you the place firms thrive is going to, in the long run, grow your economy more. So I'm not, there's no one answer to this question, and it's going to depend on the industry and the moment and who you can attract. But my bias is against going after the big deal.
I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Mr. Rickle.
Madam Chair, first of all. Madam Chair, first of all, I want to thank Chris and Mark for arranging this meeting. And I thank the speakers for a very good
Can you please speak a little bit
presentation.
more directly into your microphone? Thank you.
I have several questions and I want to break them in small pieces so we can go one at a time. The first speaker spoke that our zoning policy needs to be modified or has to be progressive, something like that. I'd like to get some specific advice. What are we missing?
This is a great subject, and I understand a difficult one. And we run into it a lot of places. For decades, everybody's been using Euclidean zoning, right? So you separate industry and residential and parkland and other kinds of uses. And as industry has modernized and changed, it's not as offensive. It's not big smokestack factories. It's can be in commercial buildings. It can be mixed with residential more. And there's a shift away from Euclidean zoning to more mixed uses and more zoning around transit, around this jobs housing mismatch and enabling people to move goods, places and goods, people and ideas around.
Excuse me, could you explain Euclidean zoning?
I think I just did. Euclidean zoning, literally, I mean, it's the basic zoning when it literally says you have to separate uses.
Thank you.
Right, as opposed to mixed use. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about that. But yeah, so this, and we pulled in two national experts because we don't do a lot of zoning work. I mean, and the report you'll see has a bunch of ideas for how to think differently about zoning along your industrial corridors, different and creating some mixed use areas, et cetera. So I realized the phrase in the PowerPoint of move toward more progressive zoning or something. It doesn't have a lot of content. It's hard to get all this content in it and not spend hours, but I think the answer to your zoning question is that there are opportunities to zone more deliberately around mixed use growth and around placing growth closer to where transit hubs are, et cetera. So Ed Glazer from Harvard, probably one of the leading urban economists in the country, talks about the very reason we have cities is to reduce the transaction costs or transportation costs, moving goods, people, and ideas around. What makes your economy efficient is when people can connect with each other, jobs, firms can connect with each other, move goods well. You have good infrastructure here, but as you grow, it's getting messier, and you're going to have to take that in account as zoning. This is a huge challenge, though. I mean, it's easier for me to say that. You don't. The county doesn't zone for the county, right? So this is an area where you need an EDO and the capacity to collaborate with the municipalities around a common vision of where you're going to grow and what uses and how they're going to zone, because the zoning is not up to you in most of these areas.
Okay, yeah, second question. You mentioned quite a few times high value agriculture or high value crops. What are those?
I'm going to flip that to Ashley, I think.
Got to use the mic.
Fruits and vegetables is the short answer,
Fruits and vegetables. Okay.
as an example, but
You mentioned avocado. Is that's not grown here?
But
Yes.
climate change hasn't hit there yet. Maybe a couple more years.
Okay. Yeah.
Very rich farm. There's huge
That
demand.
microphone.
Or organic farming.
You have
right?
very rich farmland. There's huge changes in demand for food, right? For natural food, for organic food, for, and for specialty foods. And you have good food manufacturing and agriculture that you grow it and sell it to a manufacturer who adds value and then sells it to a consumer. You make more money than if you're growing, take even the soybeans. You're growing soybeans and selling to farmers who feed them to cattle. They're not going to pay you as much as if you're taking the soy and selling it to a manufacturer who's going to sell it, convert it into a commercial product. So when I say value add, it's looking at what you can grow on this rich farmland that will move to market and sell for more.
I see. Another thing is about the strategic connection between our county and the others. And we thought we were well connected. We are part of CMAP. and part of the Greater Chicago outfit. So what are we missing?
So the economy, I mean, literally, metropolitan areas are defined as economic units. They're labor sheds, right? And the economy nationally has moved to metropolitan areas, right? 85% of the population produces like close to 95% of the outputs in metropolitan areas because of the benefits of concentrating complementary assets, right? That's why metropolitan areas are growing so fast, and Chicago will continue to grow, particularly economically. So the connections we're talking about are not, CMAP is great. We do lots of work with CMAP. Intersect Illinois is great. The new partnership is great. Those are coordinating partnerships which are useful. You're going to need to keep growing connections at an economic business to business level. As you decide, let me give you this example. In Cleveland, we did a project, a lot of tier 4 or 5 auto suppliers in the auto supply chain, little shops, not unlike some of your metal manufacturers, that were slipping. They were fading. If you look at a bubble chart, they're in the quadrant. We have a lot of these, but they're flipping. Cleveland has a lot of growth in medical implants and in wind farms as industries. And we created a manufacturing innovation center that helped firms migrate, do product development, employee training, and market development to migrate from the auto supply chain into wind farms and medical devices. So if you can make a ball bearing for a car, you can make one for a wind farm or for a hip joint, right? So that involved connecting these firms up the supply chain within their industry. So when I say the economy is regional, there's certain things you can focus on here and become kind of sub-regional great at, but your food, your metals are going to thrive by being part of the growth of those industries in the metro area and helping drive them, lead them. So I'm not just talking about kind of high-level organizational connections. I'm talking about industry relationships.
I see.
The last question, Mr. Iqbal.
Okay.
because we've-
The export, you did not mention very much about it, but.
About what?
The export business. You did not elaborate very much. Do we have any opportunity to export anything?
I'm sure you do, and it's an oversight. We've done a bunch of work on exports and foreign direct investment in other contexts, and it's not hard to look at. We've done it for the Chicago Metro, so it wouldn't be hard for us to pull some data on that. It'd be a little out of date, but it's a good point. I'm sure you have export opportunity, and we can pay a little more attention to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Bates.
I have 2 questions. First of all, you mentioned this, that in King County, our jurisdiction is actually not inside of the municipalities. And I'm trying to figure out how that is going to work. And I'd like to know if any of the cities such as Aurora, Elgin, et cetera, and hi, Mayor, if Geneva are buying into this already, or if they already have their own established EDOs, and they'll say thanks, but we've got our own show.
I'm going to invite others, and always Mark and Chris and John and Ashley are welcome to jump in here. Let me say a couple things first. First of all, my closest work to this is in the Southland, right? So we did a project for 40 suburbs in South Cook County, just south of Chicago, and created a development authority, a certain kind of EDO. These were 40 small municipalities that had limited capacity, and we're 5 years in, and by now this EDO has the credibility and the respect it has contracts with most of the municipal governments to help them with economic development.
Is that a county effort or the municipalities themselves?
The county
Okay.
sponsored the effort, and we created an organization that was
All right.
cross-sector.
And that's Will
Um,
County? Is it Will?
Cook County,
Cook.
right. Cook County sponsored the effort. And we actually raised some foundation and private money for it, but basically Cook County seeded it.
Mhm.
Now it's supported by foundations and other kinds of things. And the municipalities are starting to actually be clients of it.
Okay.
So it is doable. In terms of the situation here, we interviewed a bunch of the different municipalities and development groups. By and large, people were enthusiastic about the idea at a high level.
Have you talked to people in King County?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We
Oh, I'm
interviewed
sorry.
Elgin, we
Okay.
interviewed Aurora, we interviewed, others will have to give the detail because I was in about
Okay.
a third of the interviews. I didn't do all of them. But
Okay.
I think overall, we found receptivity to the idea and value of more coordination, but the devil's in the details. I don't
Mhm.
want to make it sound like it's easy to move from, it took 5 years for the SDA to develop the credibility that municipalities want it to be leading economic development
Okay,
and supporting them. And it's going to take time, and you'll have to be sensitive to them having their own agendas, but that's part of why you're needed, because their agendas sometimes conflict and hold you back.
okay. Thank you. One more
Yep.
question, please.
I'm sorry,
Yes, and
Uh,
for an example, when we had Tony here from Elgin, just spoke to us,
Mhm.
saying that they are in support of this.
Mhm.
So yes, please.
Yeah, to help answer that question more fully, as I mentioned, we had 26 of our economic development partners, mostly municipalities, who provided letters of support when we applied for the grant to do this work. But I also want to introduce John Gruling, who I mentioned earlier has been working as our economic development advisor. Over the past year, he and Chris in tandem oftentimes met with a lot of municipalities. I'll let him characterize a little bit about some of the responses.
Okay. Don't forget, I'm from Aurora. So that's what I'm mostly interested in.
You got people from Elgin
Oh,
here
totally
too.
selfish.
We talked to her.
Selfish.
We talked to Aurora too. John Gruling, it's a pleasure to be here. I've talked to some of you and it's the ones I haven't met. Hello. Early in my tenure with my job here as an advisor to Kane County on economic development, I interviewed in pretty good depth 23 of our municipalities. And, the question always ended up being, would you support a countywide economic development organization? I had 100% support. And the reality is, why would they do that? Because an economic development organization at the county level can do things that the individual municipalities can't do. One of them is market our county as part of a region to the world. It's not inexpensive to do that. And oftentimes the county economic development organization can't put the resources together to do that. The other thing is to help our communities do a better job of what they're already doing in economic development. Holding boot camps, training elected officials, going into the communities, into the business communities and making these connections that Bob talked about. Can only really be done by a county level organization. And being part of the greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership has proved that. And I think Economic Development Group here would really raise the level of, if you will, municipal competency in economic development.
Municipal competency.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that was a good answer. I have
Thank
one
you.
more question.
Thank you.
Okay. I am still the environmental and energy chair and the sustainability pain in the neck for everybody. So I want to ask the question, what is your strategy doing to protect our resources? We have mining in Kane County. We need to protect our water. We need to protect our agricultural land and not become a third world country to the rest of I don't like the mining. I don't like, and we have to protect our water. Our resources can be frittered away.
So you'll have noticed that our kind of our 5 circles in the middle say sustainable and inclusive development. We really believe, and the evidence shows this, we've done the work ourselves and published it around inclusivity. The places with the most inclusivity grow the fastest. It's a little counterintuitive, but they avoid the high cost of poverty and they deploy all their assets. So every economic development project has to pay attention to who's participating and benefiting. We believe the same thing about sustainability. We're starting to do much more work around sustainable manufacturing. In fact, I'm on the MHUB board. I mentioned MHUB earlier. We have I think we're about to, this is not public or certain yet, but a huge project around decarbonization of industry. I mean, this is a huge growth area, and industries that don't decarbonize are going to be in trouble in 10 years, right? So, and they need help figuring out how to do it. And there's opportunities for entrepreneurs and for new product development. And because that's a big industrial opportunity. So we think our report will not get to that level of detail of how you can do this sustainably, but it will say you have to find ways to do it sustainably, and there are ways to do it.
Now you're winning me over.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Chuby.
So I just want to make a comment about the high value crops. I'm going to disagree with you tremendously about what a high value crop is. When you diminish the need for feed for animals, you also diminish the need for export because we have corn. We're looking at making jet fuel with our products, but there's industries that actually depend on feed crops that drive very large segments of the economy. And I just feel like you just kind of diminished the entire idea of growing crops for feed animals. I mean, I have to admit, in all fairness, I represent the equestrian world, and we generate a lot of money in this town, in the county, and to just say that we should be growing fruits and vegetables when there are millions of dollars out there being consumed by horses and by cows
Well, I
and
think-
by things like that. So I just wanted to temper it
No, I think
with,
that's well taken.
you
I
know,
agree with that.
don't just blow it off as not a high value fruit and vegetable crop.
I think that's well taken. The oversight on our part, it's two things. One is I overstated it because we're not talking about shifting all of your agriculture. It's just the proportion of agriculture, right? It's just, and the other is I was not aware, I think what you're telling me is that the value added of feed crops is realized in cane. And I did not realize that,
Yes.
right?
It employs people.
Because part of
it
what
causes
part of what we're
growth.
trying to do is make sure you're growing crops that add value in cane. And
Well, they add value everywhere. I mean,
know they do
you know,
everywhere.
if
clearly you need feed crops
right.
generally. The
But
question
it-
is the proportion of
It touches a lot more things than you give it credit for. And I understand
Okay.
that this is,
No,
you could just give a percentage, but if that's all people hear is that fruits and vegetables are a high crop, then that's not true.
I think that's well taken.
Okay, thank you.
And we're still writing this report and we can pick this up. And if you have more detail, I'm particularly interested in kind of the impact of the feed crops up the value chain in cane. If you have any more detail on that, Ashley would love to get it.
I think you could look at the number of competitive horse stables in Kane County that would tell you just how valuable feed crops are to Kane County. Not to mention the fact that when they take those horses and they compete across the United States, they're building other people's economies. They're driving tourism, they're doing
understand.
hotels, they're doing food, things like that. So please just don't devalue it.
And I would agree, the horse industry, equestrian industry here, from a pleasure, from a tourism, from a growth of that industry, is very valuable here in Kane County. Very similar to what we talked about when I was coming in to protect the open space and farmland. And we had that, and you said, well, there's value added to that. We discussed, this is part of that value added. There's something very romantic, if I could say, about driving and seeing the horses still here. It's quite pleasurable, and it is probably not romantic from people who own it, but for those of us who don't own horses,
Pastoral.
it's a
I understood. Yeah.
of the west of, the way things were once. It's what makes Kane County pleasurable and different. Yes.
I'm glad you
Pax.
said that because that was just exactly what I was thinking. I'm sorry, I got hung up on Euclidean about 15 minutes ago. Had to do a dive in there. Apparently Euclidean
was like
geometry
triangles
applies
and
to
stuff.
everything, but my thought was more like
We don't like that word.
the holistic is really holistic living with it's maybe more what would appeal to me is having a community and county that is livable. I don't want to make sure that we mention the Fox River, which I think is probably one of the biggest drivers in the future. And it always has been in the past, as far as tourism and
Industry.
and what you speak to, the livability of this area. I think that all has to be figured that all has to be figured into the. I think when you keep talking, big box and industry is important, but we want to have a livable city and have economy and a lifestyle where we can actually walk and get places without having to go get in our car and drive for an hour, which you're talking about Mr. Euclid doing his little circles and triangles. You're going to have that is a focus I think we should be looking at. And tourism, which you mentioned at the end there, I had on my list there with the, because it's great to bicycle around and see the horses as well, not just drive.
Bicycle around the horses.
Yeah.
Just, before we leave that, I want to just,
We've got some other.
I want to
people.
break this into two parts, my comments. We totally believe in livable communities, right? There's a causation issue, and there's some work on my website, including a document called Grads and Fads. There's a pretty sophisticated study about the extent to which livability and amenities are driven by having income and jobs. You know, in terms of what comes first, you know, there was a Joe Courtwright and people nationally 10, 15 years ago were saying, if you build beautiful communities, or take Richard, Florida, you know, if you have lots of gay bars, you're going to attract creative people and then you're going to grow your economy. Turned out to be wrong, right? Turned out you got to grow your economy and that attracts the diverse people and they support amenities. So there's a balance here in time, and livability is very important. It's an economic growth plan. That's why I'm talking more about that than livability, but I agree with it. There's a vision question for you though. At the moment, Kane statistically, I don't want to overstate this, but on the balance between agriculture, industry, agriculture is there in 50%. On the balance between bedroom community and industry, it's statistically a bedroom community. I mean, it's got more people commuting out of Kane and who come here for the livability. You could decide, I mean, you can't decide for the whole county, but you could decide you want to grow that function, right? If you just, you know, like I grew up in the North Shore in Evanston, you know, and at the time, especially, and this was a bedroom community, its goal wasn't to attract industry. It was to create amenities that would attract people. You know, as you decide, or the collaborative, the EDO decides, what's the balance of supporting residential and housing development and industry development and preserving agriculture, this is going to be one of the issues, you know. And if you decide your goal is to attract people to expand as a bedroom community and residential, then you will focus more on amenities and horseback riding and free open spaces and all the other stuff. So it's not a yes or no. It's the mix you want.
Mr. Tepe.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Tuppy here. Being a mathematician by education, I understood the Euclid's a relatively compound question. That's because I always look at.
I'm getting a new sheet of paper out.
Okay.
Question.
I'm really happy to hear that you went out and interviewed all of the economic development organizations in the county and got their stamp of approval on doing it. So that big part of what we would be doing is to help coordinate this, okay? And I'd like to hear a little bit more about the coordination plans and how it would relate to kind of the following. One, you referred to BIPOC group. I had always referred to that as minority entrepreneurs, but is there a major differential there where they need specific support? Okay. And in addition to that, are you working with organizations like the junior colleges? I know that Elgin Community College has worked with the City of Elgin Development Group to help develop specific educational programs to help provide the trained workforce that they need in specific areas. How would that begin to work with it? When you're working with this BIPOC group, do they need some amount of support in entrepreneurial work? So are you working with the Small Business Association there? Because they have a group at Elgin Community College, or are you working with SCORE? So how are these kinds of resources going to be utilized, you know, to help get not only more business coming here, but also to grow the businesses that we have here? And how is that going to do it by not competing, but cooperating with all of these other economic organizations? And you get 30 seconds to answer.
The answer is yes. Now, I'm gonna turn this to John in a second. I feel like these questions are a little ahead of ourselves. We're not we're not organizing anything yet. Once you decide to do this, it will be a real organizing effort. So we are checking in with people to make sure we're proposing things that align with what they do. But everything you've said will have to happen. It will be part of creating the thing. In the Southland, we took almost a year of just having meetings and convening different stakeholders before we created a new organization, just to agree on what it should do and how it should relate and who its partners should be. All of this is none of it should supplant or compete with existing organizations. It should take advantage of their resources and help deploy them better. The one thing I do want to comment on is the BIPOC stuff. I think, I mean, you have the highest per capita concentration of Hispanics in the state, and it's a huge asset that is mostly in workforce now, but also entrepreneurship, and does need, you know, we know, I've done a lot of work in this area. BIPOC populations face some challenges and barriers to getting finance, to getting business mentoring, other kinds of things. So there is a need to support all entrepreneurs, but there are some special capacities and facilities and resources that can help grow your BIPOC entrepreneurship. John, do you want to?
And then Ms. Strathman,
Sounds like you're getting-
and then Dr. Silva, and then Mr. Ross.
As Bob said, we're at the front end of this, okay? So once the strategy is agreed upon, and I hope that we're close to on a lot of points there, the creation of an economic development organization would start with the county as a leader, some key municipalities being involved. But at the end of the day, it'll be a round table with everybody there providing input. But as our consultants indicated, what's missing right now, we've got some great economic development organizations operating in Kane County, be they in City Hall or in the Chamber of Commerce or a separate economic development group. But they're working in silos, and they're not reaching out because there's no vehicle to do that. That's what the County Economic Development Organization will do. Now, the way this works the best, though, is we have to bring in the private sector leadership. We need private enterprise to be really at the core of this county economic development organization. It'll be a public-private partnership, both in makeup and financial support. And I think that's really where this all comes together. And in terms of driving a program, yeah, there'll be a BIPOC, minority business enterprise program. We've clearly identified that as a need here. So we have to fit it into our schedule, into our plan. But traditional business retention is going to be a big part of it. We need to keep what we have here, because without that, we're not going to bring anybody else, and the companies that are here won't grow. So those are some core elements of what this collaboration will do.
Yes, Ms. Strathman.
Yes, thank you. I would like to know, as you plan your strategy, if you are familiar with the Strong Town movement?
No. So if you, at least not, well, someone. At least not by that label. So tell me what.
I think it's an excellent strategy for incorporating, making a town livable and sustainable and walkable. Is that the right?
Oh, so it's just like placemaking, like within smaller towns?
Yeah, Mark Van Kerkhoff. Yeah, it's more than placemaking. It's sort of a grassroots efforts of helping particularly smaller towns, but any large town think through their vision and strategy for how they want to do development, what kind of community they want to do. So it's certainly a model that more and more communities are starting to use, but it's a good solid planning model.
Yeah, I just wondered, I want you to be aware of it so you can take a look at it. I know there's a group of people in Elgin who are meeting regularly and talking about it. And, I think there's nothing more than just talking right now, but it's an important thing. I think it's Strong Towns, and the author is Charles Marohn, Marohn Jr. And it's got some really interesting points. I think it would be a good strategy to at least learn about before you.
Thank you.
Dr. Silva.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the floor. I would just like to say that I love the fact that we're engaging in this conversation. I love the fact that the question was asked, but I'd like to bring BIPOC to the table. I would like to ask them, my particular experience, ask us, my particular experience as a single mom trying to kind of, so to speak, make it. that's where I would like to see a lot of the support go to single moms and dads to hold the home, the economic resources, the transportation, all of that, it's important. But I feel it's important to ask them, to ask people who are in this individual group. I can help answer some questions, but I also understand that I have a great amount of privilege as a white presenting individual who sits on a government board. So I think it's really important to bring BIPOC to the table and ask those questions of all of us. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Ross.
Hi, Roth here. The comment you made, Bob, was regarding, you said, agricultural is a large percent of our county. I mean, we are still pretty much agricultural. It's 56% of the land, but we happen to have the right chart up. It's only paying 2% of the taxes. And then you mentioned residents or home is a large percent of the county. They're paying 76% of the taxes. And if you look at commercial and industrial, we're 22%. I don't want us becoming a Naperville, and that I think is a choice as a county. We need to decide, what do we want to become a county?
Well, sorry, what does it mean to become a Naperville?
Well, at miles, it takes you 2 hours to get across the city of Naperville because of traffic and no ag left. But it's all commercial and industrial. I don't think we want to become, and I don't know what percent they are, so I can't talk to that. But it takes you 2 hours to get across Naperville during rush hour or on a Saturday.
I don't think the statistic made it in the PowerPoint, but in the draft report, we're surprised to find that just the economic value of your agricultural outputs is way lower than your manufacturing and other business.
No,
So I'm not surprised that it's a small part of your tax base.
Well, part of the tax base because they don't pay taxes because the way the tax structure is set up.
Well, we also have, don't get me going on our tax system generally and the pressure it puts on property taxes.
But we get a lot of residents coming in complaining about the high taxes. Now, it's not necessarily the county. They come in and say school districts, which we have no control over. But it's basically who are paying taxes right now, 76% of the residents.
From my point of view, nationally, we over rely on property taxes.
Oh, I agree. I agree. In the
and
state,
that puts huge pressure and creates all kinds of inequities.
Right.
And interferes with development and, so there's.
Yeah, that's a whole nother meeting discussion. So we're not going to go
and
there.
we're not going to solve that problem.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
my report, sorry.
But no, and I agree. But for economic development, we need to decide what we want to become as a county.
Exactly. Right.
And it's not just particular towns like Aurora. We got to all work together as a county as a whole.
What I mean about protecting our resources.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would say that modern industry wants to protect its resources. What I have read, they are not out to capture and pollute as the great robber barons, let's say, did at the turn of the 20th century, going from the 1900s to the 20th century, to foul and then to leave and to grow again and foul and leave. It's different right now. All the studies that I have read, that sustainability, a sustainable approach to modern businesses is much more economically advisable, including use of different kinds of fuel sources than using the traditional fuel sources. It's more efficient, it's cheaper, and it's the growth area. So naturally, they're going to be looking towards that. So we're not talking about industry of the past. We're talking about industry of the next 10, 15 years. We have got here, going back to BIPOC, 33% and growing population is Hispanic here in Kane County. It is a rich resource that has to be tapped into, cultivated, and grown appropriately. Turn this population into not only entrepreneur, because they have an entrepreneurial spirit, but also develop as a strong economic impact upon here in the county. And they're at the tip of doing that. They are about ready to just merge because of density and opportunity. So I think that a lot of the things that were brought forward here, we can take a look at what is today, and we can take a look at what has happened in the past and treasure those things like equestrian development as holding on to what works well here in the county. But industry, if you take a look around, oftentimes I'll go back to your apple orchard or whatever orchard. You can have a manufacturing who's developing food right in the middle of a farmland. You can have housing developments that are partners with a farmland, and that is being done in Lake County and done effectively well. So there's different ways of approaching this, that we can have a marriage of industry, agriculture, equestrian, and economic development all at the same time. But we have to have that conversation here at the table, in my opinion, to map it out. So
Exactly.
I believe that this Economic Development Council has that opportunity to merge the big cities we have here, the Elgin and Aurora, the Tri-Cities, as well as our smaller communities that further out west.
That pretty much sums it up. The
It's
last thing I wanted to say is to please be in touch anytime. As you look at this stuff, if you're driving home and have a thought, an idea for a model, something we missed, we really would love to hear anything. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be writing this up. We'll be incorporating comments. We'll circulate a draft, get more comments, and try and wrap it up in the next month or so. But we'd love to get any further input.
I'd like.
This has been
these
very
slides.
helpful.
Are we going to receive these slides?
I
Where are these slides going to live?
Yeah, we'll send them to you, including the data slides behind them.
Yes, Mr. Ethman.
I have a question for Mark. What is the website again so we can vote for our county businesses in the, you remember what the website
Oh,
is?
we'll send it out tomorrow, right?
Makers Madness?
Yeah, Maker, what was the rest of it? Do you know?
Oh, yes, we'll send that out to you also so you
Good.
can vote.
'Cause I want to vote.
Are we all good?
Thank you
Okay.
for an excellent.
Thank you. It was a wonderful
Yes.
presentation. Thank you very much.
Very interesting, and thank you.
So do we have quorum in the room?
We do not.
We do not have a quorum, so we're going to go into executive session. We're going to hold that back to another meeting when we do have into executive session. So with that, if there's any other comments? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, sir.